Federalist 62 Part 2. I'm sorry, I had some phone memory issues, so I had to stop the first video. If you haven't watched it, please watch it. It's important to listen to what I had to say about Madison's take on the Senate and why, and he became so upset and he was disappointed that states, regardless of their size, each got 2 senators. So listen to that, please. As you can see, every once in a while, I bring up the names of these professors that have written books about the founding of the United States, that have given lectures. And like I've said before, definitely, if you can't read all their books or some of their books, definitely watch their talks. They're on panel discussions, they're giving lectures, and just watch them, and gradually you'll gain more knowledge about the history of the United States, especially the history of the founding of the United States, the era we were talking about, reading the Federalist Papers. It helps a lot. I will show you some of the other names that I think you'd benefit from if you read the books, or read their books, or at least watch their lectures. Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning of Federalist 62 by Madison. Having examined the Constitution of the House of Representatives and answered such of the objections against it as seemed to merit notice, I enter next on the examination of the Senate. The heads into which this member of the government may be considered are: 1. The qualifications of senators. 2. The appointment of them by the state legislatures. 3. The equality of representation in the Senate. 4. The number of senators and the term for which they are to be elected. 5. The powers vested in the Senate. Okay, these are the 5 things that he's going to go over here. 1. The qualifications proposed for senators, as distinguished from those of representatives, consist in a more advanced age and a longer period of citizenship. A senator must be 30 years of age at least, as a representative must be 25, and the former must have been a citizen 9 years, as 7 years are required for the latter. So you can run for the House after 7 years of citizenship, and for the Senate after 9 years of citizenship. And you've got to be at least 30 years old to run for the Senate. The propriety of these distinctions is explained by the nature of the senatorial trust, which, requiring greater extent of information and stability of character, requires at the same time that the senators should have reached a period of life most likely to supply these advantages, and which, participating immediately in transactions with foreign nations, ought to be exercised by none who are not thoroughly weaned from the possessions and habits incident to foreign birth and education. So you need this 9 years of citizenship. When he uses the word wean, it's the word they use these days for, like for example, when a puppy is born, and there's a period of time that you cannot take the puppy away from his or her mom. And that's the period he's talking about. He says, so you got to live and be away from where you are from for 9 years, so that some of those habits that you might have had from the place of your birth or education those will gradually go away, and you'll be more accustomed and more accustomed to the new setting, to the new country where you are at. The term of 9 years appears to be a prudent mediocrity between a total exclusion of adopted citizens whose merits and talents may claim a share in the public confidence and an indiscriminate and hasty admission of them, which might create a channel for foreign influence or the national councils. So the term mediocrity here, he uses here, it doesn't have the same meaning, negative connotation that it does today. He's talking about that middle ground. He says this was the middle ground that we had to choose, come up with, that would be good altogether. We want the person to be far enough, we want the person to have been long enough from the country of his birth, yet at the same time, we don't want to not acknowledge their talents and the energy and the good things that they can bring to the running of the government. By the way, if since I'm reading these for immigrants and English language learners, this will be one of your citizenship tests if you haven't become a citizen yet. 2, it is equally unnecessary to dilate on the appointment of senators by the state legislatures. Among the various modes which might have been devised for constituting this branch of the government, that which has been proposed by the convention is probably the most congenial with the public opinion. Again, this is the method we've chosen for electing the senators, because this was, again, a middle ground where people from different states could agree on. It is recommended by the double advantage of favoring a select appointment and of giving the state governments such an agency in the formation of the federal government as must secure the authority of the former and may form a convenient link between the two systems. So, as I have already said, over most of the last century and this century, actually approximately for the last 100 years, people have been electing their senators directly. But before that, for almost 130 years, state legislatures would choose the senators. And he says we've done this because we want, now he's going to come to it here in a minute. He says it's a compound republic. We want sovereignty in two places in a way, and we want to make sure that the state governments don't think that the federal government is centralizing power and taking the state government's powers away. One thing in part 1 I forgot to mention was that after the July 16th to 21st, where Madison was disappointed 3 times. In the convention, the Philadelphia Convention, those 5 days, 3 of the things that he really, really badly wanted, he couldn't get because there were no votes for it. So after that day, he decided that, well, if the small states are going to have 2 senators each equal to the large states, then the Senate might just become too strong this way. So what he planned to do after that, he made the presidency, when they came to talk about what the president can do, cannot do, he thought that it would be proper to have the executive branch, the president, become a little stronger and less dependent on the Senate. Because he didn't want the Senate to get too powerful. Because remember, he wanted the Senate to be a check on the House. And now when especially small states got equal votes with the large states in the Senate, he decided, okay, we're going to give president a little bit more power to make sure the Senate doesn't overstep its bounds. So checks and balances, division of power, separation of power, judicial independence, all of these things that we talked about. Elections being set every 2 years for the House of Representatives, every 6 years for the Senate, every 4 years for the president. All of these gave the system a constancy that Madison and Hamilton believed will create the foundations of a great republic.